Welcome to the Wits and Weights podcast for busy professionals who want to get strong and lean with strength training and sustainable diet. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and in each episode, we'll examine strategies to help you achieve physical self-mastery through a healthy skepticism of the fitness industry and a commitment to lifting heavy and eating right. Welcome to episode 7 of Wits and Weights. I had the pleasure of being on another podcast a few months ago called Finding Your Strength Radio, powered by Romeo Athletics, where I was interviewed by Andrew Romeo. He's an excellent host, experienced coach, and he's also the owner of my longtime gym, Romeo Athletics. He asked me a ton of great questions about my journey to fitness, how I got into lifting and strength training, different movements and programming, my recent bulk and cut, body recomposition, sustainable nutrition, and lots of other random topics like metabolism, walking, and even the similarities between music and lifting. I think the conversation has some interesting and valuable information for those of you looking to transform your life in terms of strength, diet, and overall fitness. It was a fun interview, and if you want to learn more about Andrew's podcast, Finding Your Strength Radio, I've linked to it in the show notes, and I encourage you to check it out and subscribe. And if you enjoy this episode, I really appreciate if you could leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts for Wits and Weights Strength Training for Skeptics. Enjoy the conversation.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Finding Your Strength Radio. I'm your host, Andrew Romeo. Guys, I'm super lucky today, and I think you guys are super lucky as well, for our guest. Our guest is Philip Pape. Philip's been with me since 2011. So if you're doing the math on that right now, that's a decade. Philip has been training at Romeo Athletics, which used to be CrossFit Revelation, for 10 years. So he's seen a lot of our changes, a lot of what's come, what's gone, what we've prioritized, what we don't prioritize, and how the whole gym works. So welcome to the show, Philip.
Hey, thanks for having me. You trying to say I'm old here?
I am not trying to say you're old by any means, because I've been here for 12 years. Yeah, exactly. So if I'm calling you old, I'm calling myself even older.
Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, man, I was really excited to bring you on. I know we were chatting the other day, and we briefly mentioned podcasting, and it immediately popped in my head. I was like, Philip should come on the podcast. So here we are. To dive into this, I know a lot of members do know who you are, but there's also probably a lot of members who don't know who you are. So if you want to just give us a quick background of, Phil, where are you coming from? What's your background look like? What do you do? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no problem. I kind of keep to myself here at the gym. So I am an engineering manager at Raytheon Technologies, based here out of Windsor Locks. I've been in technology, product development, software and project engineering for about 20 years.
Cool.
That'll be 20 years next year. And I love my job there. I love working on products that keep people safe in the air, that protect our military, really cool stuff. And that's like my day job. But as you know, I have a lot of side ventures and hustles and endeavors that I do.
I love it. Were you ever involved in sports? Was sports anything that was ever kind of put physical activity and that kind of stuff in the back of your brain where you're like, I like being active? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, the answer is an emphatic no.
Okay.
So I have a very different background from a lot of folks. I was not in organized sports.
Okay.
We grew up in Florida. The weather was great all year round. So I played football on the street with my brother and friends.
Sure.
Played baseball on the street. So I was active in that sense, but never in organized sports. I went to an arts high school.
Cool.
Didn't even have athletics.
Okay.
Went to college, gained the freshman 15, then the sophomore 15.
Gotcha.
Skinny, fat, fluffy, my whole life. And finally, the senior year of college, they built a brand new gym. This is over at RPI in New York. And I decided to try some machines, some cardio, kind of flail around in the gym like most people. Didn't know what I was doing. And then that's it. Graduated college, still not in great shape. Didn't know what to do in the gym. I knew how to maintain my weight with diets, so to speak. Atkins at the time.
What do I do? All right, I see this ad for Atkins, as you're referring to. That'll help me lose my freshman 15.
Always
Let's go for it.
Yeah, it's like conflicting sources of information all the time.
Of course, that's what's out there, right? I try to be the beacon of truth for a lot of people in that regard.
Tell me about it. And today it's both a lot easier and a lot more difficult with the internet, right?
Yeah. The information era where everything is at our fingertips and we can do anything. Yep. But there's a downside to that because there's a lot of misinformation out there that'll lead you down a bad path. Diving back into one thing you said, so you went to an art school. What type of art did you practice?
Yeah, I was a musician. So
Cool.
I played saxophone, jazz, and I did that well after college. I mean, when I met my wife, we were set up on a date when I was actually playing a gig.
Wow.
And this is
Very
while I'm an
cool.
engineer, and this is just the thing I do on the side at
Sure.
night, right? So I played music for 3 years, and it was one of these high schools where you had to travel on a bus and a metro rail and a metro mover into downtown Miami, and then you were there for probably 3 hours longer than average high school kids.
Okay.
Because half your day is music.
Very cool.
So it was a great experience. It was a small school, especially being in a big city.
Sure.
Yep. And they had a good academic program as well.
Absolutely. I mean, if you become an engineer and gone to the lengths that you've gone with your education, they must have had a good education system.
They did.
That's very cool, man. Because one interesting thing that I have noticed from musicians that come into weightlifting is typically musicians are meticulous in terms of wanting things to be perfect, right? Because when you're making music, you want it to sound perfect. And then you come into the world of lifting, and they have that same mindset of, how do I make this movement? How do I make what I'm doing perfect? And it really gives people a solid work ethic and also an ideal of trying to do things really well.
Yes.
So I think that's a great background to come into probably engineering, because I'm assuming if you're designing flight controls or whatever you're designing, it needs to be perfect.
It is funny you link all of those, because I've always linked music to engineering, right? The math that's inherent in music.
Yep.
The music kids in my art school were always the top of the class compared to, let's say, the artists or dancers,
Gotcha.
right? Just the different type of mindset.
Just the way your brain works and connects
right?
to things.
Very mathematical, scientific. But I hadn't thought of the fact that lifting is its own science that can be thought of in that way. And I remember when I first met you, we talked about plate math. You know, you could just say, 135, 185, 225, right? And I was like, what are you doing? I have to calculate what's on the bar, right?
I've just seen those combinations so many times where there's no thought behind it anymore.
Yeah, and I'm there now, finally.
Yeah, I'm sure you are, absolutely. The only thing that always throws you for a wrench is when there's a 35-pound bar, and then you're like, wait a second, hold on. Minus 10.
Or have you heard the joke about 35-pound plates?
Yeah, from Kabuki, how they absolutely hate them. But what's the joke?
Oh, well, it's how do you make a 35-pound plate? You weld together a 25 and a 10. Because you're not supposed to have 35-pound plates is the joke, right?
Yep, that is. Yeah, Kabuki did a big thing out there with Chris Duffin about trying to get rid of 35-pound plates, just obviously joking. But for the most part, you don't use them that often.
No, you don't. If they're here, they're convenient. Or you can use them for calf raises.
Have you ever looked into why they decided to go with 45-pound things and not 50 pounds? I mean, I've been in the strength industry for probably over 2 decades, and I've never looked into that. But, why would you make a 45-pound plate and not a 50-pound plate?
That is a good question. I don't know if it's related to being 20 kilos.
Yeah, it's probably something where it came from the Olympic lifting world of 20 kilos is the 44 pounds, closest to 44 is 45. We'll cast them that way. Yeah. Dude, that's super interesting stuff. So a little bit of background where you're coming from. So you get out of college, and did you go right into the engineering world, and you stayed in the music world? So you're in both of them. Mm-hmm. Was physical fitness part of your life at that point?
Hey, listeners, this is Philip Pape, and I'm excited to announce our upcoming, totally free 21-day challenge starting December 1st. It's called the Wits and Weights No Diet Holiday Body Recomp Challenge. This challenge is about learning how to achieve body recomposition. That's building muscle and losing fat at the same time without dieting or restriction throughout the holidays. I'll be giving you free videos, guides, and personalized coaching in a private group chat to help you enjoy the holidays while being satisfied and guilt-free. The kickoff call is Friday, November 17, and the link to enroll is in the show notes. No matter what episode you are listening to, don't worry. If you're hearing this after November 17, you can still register and get access to the replay and resources before the challenge starts on December 1st. Again, to join the Wits and Weights No Diet Holiday Body Recomp Challenge to build muscle and lose fat without dieting through the holidays, click the link in my show notes. Now back to the episode. Not really. There was a gym I actually lived at Bigelow Commons right here in Enfield.
Exactly
for
what
a few
you're
years.
talking about. Yep.
And there was a little gym there with, just like every gym, you've got some cardio machines and you've got some like Nautilus style machines, maybe a couple dumbbells, definitely no barbells.
Absolutely. It's too dangerous.
So for up until I was 30, so that was like my first 8 years living here, on and off, global gyms, didn't have programming, didn't have a plan, and pretty much stayed where I was.
Gotcha. And so how old were you when you decided to venture into the world of CrossFit and look me up on the internet and go down that path? When was that in your life?
I had just turned 30, and we got pregnant with our first child.
Interesting.
You know, it's these moments in life that make you think, right? I'm going to be a father. I need to get in shape. I don't know how to do it, but I can figure it out. So I did the research, and there was this big craze called CrossFit, right?
There was.
2011, it's getting toward its peak, I think. CrossFit's peak was like mid
I would say
teens,
probably like
teens.
2013, 2014, it was like every week there's a new gym starting, there's more, and you're like, oh my God, how big does this bubble get before it pulls back in?
Yeah, it's like bank branches. You see a new one like every week on every corner. So that was, so I tried a couple gyms, and I ended up here. I think it was convenient to work. And I definitely liked the vibe and the culture. And you guys were pretty small back then. It was like a third the size it is today.
So, yeah, I'm trying to think back. I think when you first started, we were probably the L-shaped facility where it was you walked into the bay where all of, like the exercise equipment is right now, like the Sorinex rigs and the turf is. You would walk in there, but it was a green carpet. And a wall with a big window, and you walked through that, and there was a standalone rig that went the length of it.
Yes.
And then to the right, there was like another little like half bay where I built a pull-up bar out of 2x4 by whatever by 8s, and then plumbing pipe that I ran through and connected to both sides of the wall. And everybody loved that pull-up bar because it had like this big flex to it. So when people were doing pull-ups, the bar would flex down and like kind of pop you back up.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. It was pop you back up and down. But dude, that was a long time ago.
Seems like it, right?
So coming into the CrossFit world, what were you looking to do? What were your? I don't even know if you remember. It was a long time ago at this point. But what was your goal? Like, what were you trying to get into at that point?
Yeah, I figured that I couldn't do things on my own successfully in that space, and I needed somebody to tell me what to do. It was basically what it came down to. CrossFit sold itself on small group classes with coaching in a good community environment, right? And with all this cool stuff that I just didn't know about. And I say stuff like that because that's what it was in my head at the time. And I thank CrossFit for introducing me to some things that were new to me. Barbells.
Sure.
I mean, I never picked up a barbell my entire life.
Honestly, I think that might be one of the greatest gifts that CrossFit has given the world is putting barbells in people's hands and somewhat like rejuvenating.
I agree.
Even rejuvenating powerlifting, rejuvenating Olympic lifting, rejuvenating all of these things where before people looked at a barbell and they're like, you can bench press with it, you can incline bench press with it. And people didn't even think of like deadlifting or squatting with it because they're like, that's how you get hurt.
Cleaning and snatching. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, never mind that stuff. That is outrageous.
That's crazy. Yeah, exactly. So, and I agree because I think there was several decades between, I don't know, the 70s and 80s when powerlifting and bodybuilding were kind of on the wane and the big gym model came into play.
And the Nautilus machines were big. And I mean, you look to what you were saying, like your last year of college, or everybody that goes to the global gyms. Well, I don't have a lot of money, so I can join this gym for $20 or $30. And the machine right here has this little diagram that says, put my hands here, press this direction, and I work my... Sorry if you guys can't see what I'm doing. I'm just sitting down doing like a skull crusher.
He's hopping around.
But it's on a machine. So it's like... it's very convenient. And they kind of figured out the...
Yeah, you can sit down.
Scalability.
You can sit down and do all your workouts just sitting down.
And you can look like Arnold Schwarzenegger when you're done.
There you go.
And that's the hard part of what we were talking about with misinformation. If they sell you a bad bag of goods of you can get all of this in there, they're not wrong. If you dialed in your diet and did all of the machine stuff, you could look really good. But
yeah, sure. I mean, there's value in some of those, especially the cable machines and some of the...
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I bought a lat pull down and a cable stack because they're awesome.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good stuff with that. And I know as we've trained together for a long time, you've had a history of back stuff going on. Was that prior to gyms or was that developed in gyms?
I don't think I'll ever know.
Okay.
My wife and I have a theory that it was a snowboarding accident I had around that time 10 years ago.
Really? Okay.
Where I like just took a hard fall. The board smacked right into my like rear oblique area, right?
Yep. So you went forwards then. You went forwards and your feet like kicked
I don't remember
up?
what direction I went. I don't even remember. I just know I got hit really hard. Actually, it was on the left side. And then it wasn't long after that I would occasionally squat, and it was always in a warm-up. It was never with heavy load.
Sure.
And it would just, my back would go. Like, that's the best way I can put it. You know, you feel that twing.
That twinge or that pop, and you're...
That's it, right? A lot of people have spoken about that,
It's
right?
such a bad feeling.
Yeah. But it always recovered within a few days, and I got back to normal stuff. And finally, this year, again, I was warming up a back squat at home, and I felt it again. And this time it got worse over several days to the point where I couldn't walk, sit, or stand. The pain was so bad all the way down my left leg.
Lay down.
And all you do is lay down with your feet up in the air. Like people know back pain know about that.
I know exactly. I've had to the point where I couldn't even lay in a bed where it was like what I found out was my pelvis was stuck in a certain position, so it was just creating a lot of tension where I just had to get everything popped and put back in, and it was fine. But to your point, back pain is very debilitating where you can't put your socks or your shoes on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it never really held me back all those years, really. And the funny thing is, this year, I would say I've had my best fitness year this year, despite that, which is kind of funny. But I had the issue back in March, late March, and all through April. Went through the physical therapy, and then finally had to have surgery, a microdiscectomy.
Okay, what is that?
That is where they make an incision in the spine between the vertebra of where the issue is, and incise or cut out the tissue that's herniated from the disc material. So which was impinging on my S1 nerve.
So, and that's what was pushing on the nerve. So they just cut that away, impingement goes away, and optimally, life goes back to normal.
Right, and the thing is with back surgeries is they don't have the highest success rate. It depends on what you have. So what I had is a very acute issue that the surgeon literally said the tissue like flew out when he opened me up. You know, it was just easy to get rid of it.
Yeah, it's just waiting to come out. There's so much pressure on this thing where it's like, oh, look at that. It popped right out.
Exactly. And so when I woke up from the surgery, I immediately felt no pain. I could stand up. I could walk. And the recovery for that is just a lot of walking. Okay. Can't really do any weights until you get green lighted.
Sure.
And of course, when he said, all right, you can start light weights. And I said, is that light for me or just is this an absolute number? He's like, no, light for you.
Cool.
He works with athletes and people like that. And he's
Sounds like a great doctor.
Yeah, no, good doctor. Because when everything was done, he's like, I'm not going to tell you what else to do. Just go have fun. You know, if you're back here again, you're back here again, but you'll be fine.
Go live your life.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. And I give you a ton of credit because a lot of people that have been battling the back stuff that you've been battling, at a certain point, you'd be like, well, I'm done lifting weights.
Yeah.
I guess this is
no
it.
squats, no deadlifts.
Yep. Never again will I do that. That's bad. Where you took a different approach to that, where you're like, okay, clearly there's something that's missing that's triggering this. How do I strengthen everything up around it? What do I need to do to combat this to stay active and achieve my goals while still moving forward, which is awesome. And I gave you a ton of credit for that.
I'd rather have like they say, a strong bad back than a weak bad back.
Yes.
Like I don't want to be 70 bending over to pick up a ball and there's an issue just because I didn't strengthen my back.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, you hear a lot of these doctors talk, and I've talked to PAs that are in these surgeries where they're like, most people have some fucked up discs, something is wrong somewhere in there, but as long as you're not that aware of it and it doesn't hurt you every day, you can pretty much, as you're saying, just develop strength around it, and you're going to be okay, and you're going to be able to do whatever you need to do. And I feel the same way where I've gotten pretty good at self-diagnosing when I can feel something out of alignment with my back where I'm like, all right, I just need to get a pop out of this area and I'll get all of this tension relief and I'll be fine.
Yep. But don't you find that working out usually makes it feel better?
Oh, 100%, man. I mean, so I'm in the middle of Squattober right now. Yeah. So if you're ever going to have a tired back is now, and a day that you don't look forward to getting back under a barbell to squat is right now for me. And today is a great example. Yesterday I squatted heavy. I went up to like 92% of my best, like a seesaw. And then today I had to go back under the barbell and do paused back squats. I didn't look forward to it, but when I walked away from the session, I was like, man, I feel a lot better. I'm way looser. Things are popping. Things are moving. I'm feeling good. So we're diving into kind of you just got into the CrossFit world. You had a back injury early on with snowboarding and squatting. There was some stuff there. We're not attributing it to squatting, but hey, you felt it while you were squatting light weights and while you were warming up, and things were popping with that. As you progressed over the last decade, it seems like your goals have shifted. Yes. And your goals have shifted from, hey, I just need to get fit and healthy, to where are you now with your goals? What are you doing now?
You're like a mind reader, man. I mean, you know this all about me without me telling you, right? That's why you're a good coach. So I agree. Like about 8-9 years of that time frame was just fairly inconsistent. I came in maybe 2 or 3 days a week.
Yep. So I would see you in the mornings, typically around 7 a.m.
7 a.m. I was the only one sometimes.
Yeah, and at that time frame of the gym's history, for a lot of people that don't see me coaching a lot now, I used to coach almost every class. Yep. And for a little while, Brian Carr, if Brian, you're listening, hi, Brian. Brian used to coach along with me, and we had some other coaches that coached as well. But for the majority of classes, I ran them all. So yep. Philip and I got to know each other really, really well throughout classes because, as you said, sometimes it's like right now, 7:30 is a really popular time, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people come in. But back then, no one came to 7. Right. Maybe Philip, maybe Mark did when Mark wasn't retired yet. So I would, Lauren, and I'd have an opportunity to talk to these guys for an hour 3 times a week, which is actually a really interesting and unique opportunity, because how often do you have an opportunity to connect with somebody for an hour 3 times a week? It doesn't happen often.
Yeah, it's like a fun social club. It gets together.
I mean, I call my parents once a week for 15 minutes, like never mind 3 hours a week. So I get to know all of the clients and athletes and everybody really, really well. So Philip, you went from training kind of inconsistently 2 to 3 times a week, 7 a.m.s, and then it wasn't just COVID shift of training at home, but I feel like you were shifting before COVID happened into more of the strength side.
Did you take a look at my notes before we got it? Yeah, I know. It's funny because I was thinking, I was looking back at that time frame. I said, 2019 is really when I made the shift, because I started doing RA strength.
Yep. The way that my mind works, I can specifically remember when the Sorinex rigs were against that wall, so the far wall with the bay doors. They were in the middle bay against that, and I can remember squatting in the rack next to Philip and chatting about strength and that kind of stuff. So that's where my pinpoint comes from, of being like somewhere around that time frame. Your mind switched from being like, hey, I want to exercise for time and fitness, to I want to start prioritizing strength a little bit more.
Exactly. Yeah, and I didn't entirely know why. Like, I have a much better grasp now of how important strength is as a foundation to everything.
I agree. I couldn't agree more.
Aging and mood and energy and productivity at work, like everything that's better now from a physical standpoint is because of strength.
That's awesome.
That's my opinion. But it was around 2019 doing RA strength, which for the listeners is Rome's like custom group programming for people. It used to be called the Barbell Club.
Yes, it was Barbell, and we still have a Barbell Club, and I kept that as Olympic weightlifting. So that's now, before it was like a mix of whatever kind of strength things my head was at, and I've peeled that off to be like, all right, Barbell Club is straight Olympic weightlifting, and now RA strength is kind of like my training program that I run through, that I put everybody else through at the same time.
And I would classify it as like power building.
Yes,
because you always have the compound lift to start, 1 or 2 of those, and then some form of hypertrophy or accessories, barbell rows, things like that.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, you're definitely dead on with that. We'll start out with a squat or a deadlift or a bench press, and then we move into the auxiliary movement and more so. For our listeners that don't know what hypertrophy is, anything over 8 reps. So you're talking 4 to 8 reps is myofibrillar hypertrophy, and then 8 to 12 reps you're talking about sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. So if you guys don't know what I mean by that, is 4 to 8 is get stronger, 8 to 12 is get bigger, and then above 12 you're talking more about muscular endurance.
Yeah.
So right around that time frame, you're switching over to RA strength, and somewhere in your brain it's making the connection of, I think I might like this more. Yeah,
it's funny because COVID, really did a lot for me in that regard, because everything shut down. Yep. We started working from home. All of a sudden, I had all this extra time, so I said, well, why don't I just work out 5 days a week now?
Yeah.
Right? And then you offered custom individualized programming to all your members.
Yep, that was, as soon as we kicked off COVID, that was kind of like, what do we do?
Yeah. How do you keep people engaged?
If I give you equipment and give you a program, will you do it?
Right.
You will? Great. Let's do that then.
And what do you have, right? Like I said, okay, I've got some 50s, some 25 dumbbell, no barbell, no, maybe a ball or very limited.
Let's make it work, man. Let's make it work. And as I've watched you, it seems like you're very similar to me in this regard, as you've just slowly started collecting equipment and finding deals for equipment. And like, dude, if anybody is a fitness equipment junkie, it's me.
Yeah.
And I've had to reel myself in recently because shit's gotten so expensive out there. But I am the same, where I'm just like, I'm going to pick this up.
Well, Rogue has their Boneyard sale right now.
Do they?
So pick up an Ohio bar there.
Because I just saw an email from them where they're like, just so people know, for our Black Friday stuff, like the price of steel has gone up 300%.
Yeah.
Never mind the price of cardboard. Never mind the price of tape. Never mind the price of stickers. So take that into consideration when you're purchasing equipment. Nothing's cheap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I didn't have any equipment at the time,
Gotcha.
Right? And so you programmed for me something like a moderate strength program with what I did have with conditioning.
Yep.
And here's the thing, like when you're a newbie, right, the newbie gains are still there on the table. I got to take advantage of that because my tonnage and volume went up, even though my load went down.
Gotcha.
Right. And then I also went on kind of a unintentional cut. I just wasn't eating that much.
Not eating that much, and you're lifting 5 days a week now, so your caloric expenditure just went through the roof.
Yeah, my metabolism's going up with the muscle mass, right? My activity is going up. My energy input's coming down. And so you started to see it physically. I started to see the physical transformation, which was very motivating.
Yeah.
Because my whole life I thought, my genes, there's no way you can look like this or that. And it's not all about looks, but for a lot of dudes, it is somewhat about looks, right?
And even if it's not about looks, when you start getting results in that category, as you said, it's very motivating.
It's motivating.
You're like, wow, that trap is starting to pop out a little bit more. Oh, my shoulder, no matter what anybody says, you're going to enjoy that aspect of it.
Exactly. And it feels great. You feel lighter, you feel stronger. So it started to get me into a little bit, I won't say an obsession, but a hobby of learning about strength. Right. Gotcha. And so I started to read a lot more and listen to a lot more, starting strength and bigger, leaner, stronger. And, you got the power athlete guys and Raw and all the old timers, what's his name, Marty Gallagher and the powerlifters, right? I can just listen on and on.
And those are great resources. And I mean, Philip and I will talk about the podcast that he's going to be launching soon and what he's trying to do with that. But the resources that you're citing are all solid and quality resources, which I'm super happy that you found compared to finding people that are going to lead you down a bad path that you're like, this doesn't look right.
Yeah, like the men's health guys or the supplement,
absolutely. Exactly.
Folks and whatnot. Yeah. So once I did that, I started to collect equipment, as you mentioned. I found a barbell, I found some plates, then I bought a power rack, and it went on from there to the point where, okay, I've got everything I need. What do I do now? What do I really want to focus on?
Yeah.
So I said, let me strip everything away. I even said, RA strength is great, but it's got a lot of stuff I don't even want to worry about at the moment. I just want to learn the lifts, the main big lifts.
So you were looking at squat, dead, bench?
And press.
Okay.
I love the overhead press.
Dude, not many people do because it moves so slowly. Dude, that's the musician in you. That's like the technician in you.
It is. It's a very technical lift. People don't realize that, right? Most people think the squat is the most technical, but the press is very technical. And there are, I would say, 3 styles of press, right? Okay. You have the strict press that everybody's familiar with, but then you also have the Olympic press that went out of favor, right?
Lean back.
And you get the hip drive.
If anybody has ever, Steve Powell is listening to this, people used to refer to him as Old Steve, and that's not an insult, but Steve knew we were calling him that at the same time. But he had the Olympic style press where he would like to go up. Steve's MO would be like you're front squatting. He would come up and he'd press your barbell, but you'd always look at it and be like, well, he's not push pressing.
It
Where's that momentum
like,
coming
it's the hip,
from?
and then it looks almost like a bench press.
Yeah, right? Where you lean back and press it over your head.
Yep. And then there's an intermediate form of that, or there's a combination of the two where you can do the Olympic on the first rep and do strict with the stretch reflex on the subsequent reps. Mm-hmm. Right?
And I will say I dabble in a little of those. They're almost cheater reps, but it's how do you move a bigger weight? Well, if I let this bar, even like sometimes you take it out of the rack and you let it just drop like an inch or two, and then boom, use that stretch reflex to drive it up, and you're like, well, I can press 10 more pounds doing it like
Yeah,
this. Is there anything
there's
wrong
part
with
of the range of motion that then gets the benefit from that, right?
Exactly. That
Just
overload.
like lying tricep extensions, full range back with your shoulders, right? You can do a higher load, so part of the range of motion gets the load.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you just let that tricep creep back, or your tricep creep back a little bit, and then pull,
shoulders
boom, boom, and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
That's all. And I mean, again, that comes back down to the training principle of overload. How do you overload a specific a body part? Well, sometimes giving a little body English isn't the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, like the cheater curls.
Yeah, but that's fine because at the top of your curl, you're still curling it.
Yeah, so I basically, those four, the big four, also pulls, right? Because I couldn't deadlift twice or 3 times a week, so I'd alternate with pulls and chins, and then some power cleans as well for pulling. And I did kind of a variation of starting strength and some of Andy Baker's programming and some other things that I mixed in there, like a novice linear progression.
Yep. Yeah. And I like the fact that you mentioned a linear progression because typically a lifter is considered a novice lifter until you've completed a linear progression. And it doesn't have to be Power Athlete's Bedrock or Jim Wendler's 531 or anybody else's. It can be one of your own creating, but if you don't know how much strength you can accumulate or what you're leaving on the table until you fully go through a linear progression where you're failing. And then you go back down, you reload it, you go through it up and push it up again. And then honestly, linear progressions are probably one of the hardest things I've ever done.
They're
because with mine, I'd be squatting twice a week and you barely squeak through squatting session 1 and 2 days later you have to add more weight to the bar and try to do it again and force your body to adapt to it. Like linear progressions are hard.
Yeah, no, they're super hard, and each lift wants to go at its own rate of progress.
Yep.
And
like
you've got to eat. You've got to eat. Like, yeah. Actually, the shoulder press is the first to stall in my personal experience when you're on a cut.
All shoulder presses. Like that's why I said I was surprised that you're your favorite because it's the most fickle fucking lift in the world. Where you're like,
it is.
Why doesn't this thing move any faster?
Yeah, and 1 week to the next, you could all of a sudden lose 10% of your strength. What's going on?
Yeah, what happened here? Oh, your triceps were a teeny bit fatigued. All right, fine.
Yeah, do you remember? I don't know if you remember when I was pressing like 3 or 4 times a week. I was doing like singles one day, strict one day, Olympic one day, and I've heard that that's what you need to do.
Cool.
And a lot of volume on the press for it to keep going up.
Interesting. And that worked well for you?
It worked at the time. Like if I wanted to get into it again and push the press up, that would work.
Cool.
And then what's his name? Bill Starr had his athletes years ago doing weighted dips. He did a weighted dip progression to where you were repping 100 pounds hanging off of you.
Dips are awesome. So Bill Starr is a big influencer. People think influencer and they think Instagram. Bill Starr was alive when there was no such thing as Instagram. By influencer, I mean he had a big influence on the strength community. There's even something called a Star Shrug, which is named after him for his shrug.
I was aware of that. What is that?
So it's more of like you let the bar slide down to the top of your knee, and then as you hit where you would normally shrug, you get a little bit more momentum, and you can pop that shrug up. So you can go a little bit heavier rather than holding the shrug and just shrugging.
Kind of like a power shrug.
Yeah. So Bill Starr's big.
Put it in the pins. You hold it the whole time.
Hold it the whole time. So he was more of on the Olympic side of things, and that's kind of where if you look at a clean or a snatch, that's where that's coming from. Of trying to get some hip momentum behind it. But I don't know where I was going.
I don't know. We were talking about linear progression. If you want to get strong, just strip away all the nonsense and all the accessories and all the bodybuilding stuff and just focus on heavy lifting and adding weight to the bar.
Yep, and in a consistent, controlled pattern. Yep. It's very measurable. It's actually really satisfying.
It's objective. Yeah,
and if you talk to any strength person pretty much anywhere, they're going to be like, well, are you a novice athlete or are you an advanced athlete? And the way that you're going to differentiate between the two is, have you completed any type of linear progression? Right. Yes or no? So it sounds like the beginning of COVID, you took that opportunity to focus on your big 4 to 5 lifts. You went through your linear progressions. So that's probably bringing you to like mid 2020?
That was, I didn't really start that till the fall-ish of 2020.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I started eating a lot. I mean, I gained 30 pounds in like 4 or 5 months.
Wow.
Which is really fast.
Good for you.
It was, and I'm fine with it. Like normally you'd call that almost a dirty bulk for some people.
But you don't look like you put on any bad weight.
Well, no, I didn't put on. That's the thing. It's the first time I ever put on muscle at a decent clip.
That's awesome.
And then I maintained that for a long time. And then I'm about done with the cut.
Okay.
So I'm about done with the 3-month cut.
Gotcha.
So,
if you don't mind sharing, what weight did you start at and what weight did you go to and where are you cutting to? What's that look like?
Yeah. So I started in like the 160s.
Okay.
Kind of. Not skinny fat. I mean, I had a little bit of muscle, but I was...
You definitely had muscle on you because you've been exercising.
Yeah.
So at that point, you've been exercising for 8 years.
Right.
As you said, inconsistently, but you're leaner.
Yeah.
But you're not bigger.
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of muscle.
Exactly. So I went from that to 195.
Wow.
I was thinking of getting to 200, but it's true. When you start getting up above where you normally sit, there's impacts, right? Like
it's hard.
It's hard. It's hard to eat. You don't feel as good. Even my blood work didn't look as good.
You're sweaty.
Like higher blood pressure and cholesterol. Mm-hmm. I mean, these things do start to creep up.
They do.
Very strong correlation. So I was like, okay, this is it. And then, so that's when I did my first real cut. That was last summer, heading up to my brother's wedding. That was just coincidence, but it was a wedding on the beach, so I didn't want to be, fat.
Yep. You're like, hey, we're going to a beach, and I want to look good for this.
Right. So that was kind of a random cut. I think I was trying to do keto or something at the time. I still wasn't dialing in my nutrition like I do today. And that worked out. And then I kind of maintained that for a while until then my back surgery. Right?
Okay.
So I was starting to get back into the end of my linear progression, moving into an intermediate 4-day split.
Gotcha. So what did you cut down to with the keto thing for the wedding?
165.
So you started the 160s, you went up to 195, and you went back down to 165? Okay.
Yep. And then I kind of gradually got back up into the 180s.
Gotcha.
And just hovered.
Okay.
But I was working hard. I was training hard. So I still was building muscle, but I was more into maintenance. So I don't know how anabolic it was. Who knows, right? Yeah. Then back surgery kind of interrupted. I was making good gains. I had just PR'd my deadlift like 2 weeks before, right here in the gym. Yeah. So I had the back surgery. Then after about a month, started to get back into it. Then we went on a trip to Maine for 10 days.
Gotcha.
And I had appendicitis.
Ugh. I think you and I were communicating at this point about something on the digital side of things, and I think you were like, I just got back from vacation and I'm down and out for a while. And I was like, oh man.
Yeah, exactly. It was on the day back. So silver lining, we enjoyed our whole vacation.
Good.
It was not till the day we came home, went to St. Francis Hospital. They had me sitting there all day. 3 times they had to give me painkillers. So it was like, man, you're just not a priority compared to these, people losing their arms and whatnot over here.
Your stomach hurts and your side hurts or whatever. You'll be fine. Take
your appendix hasn't burst. You're good. Yeah. More than pills.
Oh, jeez, man. That's rough.
So whatever, I read books all day or whatever and listened to podcasts, Finding Your Strength Radio. Who knows?
There you go.
And finally they got me in at like 6 p.m. half an hour for the surgery. I mean, I was out completely.
Sure.
Cut you open, they do the appendectomy. And that was a lot faster recovery than back surgery.
Absolutely.
Maybe a week or two.
Just to make sure that those stitches hold, and when your blood pressure goes through the roof, you're not ripping anything or tearing anything.
So then I got back to it again, and I said, you know what? If I can't lift heavy, why don't I lose weight?
Sure.
And go on a real cut.
Okay.
And I started to do it properly. So by properly, I mean, for me, it's more of a flexible dieting.
Sure.
Track my calories, track my macros.
Okay.
Eat whatever, as long as it fits in there.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, you'll hear, there's so many different opinions on dieting and shit like that. And in my opinion, if that's what worked really well for you, awesome.
That's the number one rule. Yep. Adherence.
Exactly. Adherence. If you can adhere to it and you can achieve the goals that you want from it, that's great.
If you can eat keto for the rest of your life, go for it.
Sure. And I know with me, I can't do that. No, I can't. I mean, I work out. I lift weights 5 days a week, and I can have a pretty open diet. But my principles of my diet is there has to be animal-based protein throughout the course of the day, some solid carbohydrates throughout the course of the day, and then I filter in a bunch of junk, unfortunately. And that's probably why I have more fluff than I have on me than I need. Because when you're lifting at like the middle of Squattober, I crushed one of the Grande home wrecker burritos today from Moe's, and it was awesome. And I have
you enjoyed it.
Yep.
And if it fits overall in your plans, that's fine, right?
Absolutely.
That's fine.
So on this final cut, where did you come down to?
All right. So I started at 190.
Okay.
And I'm today at like 168, and my goal was 165.
Okay.
I measure myself every week in terms of body fat, and I do that with calipers, and I do it with the Navy tape measurement.
Good for you.
Because I'm not going to go do DEXA or bod pod or something.
Absolutely. And there's so much. As long as you're using the same thing consistently,
yes,
that's all that matters.
Relative change that
yes,
matters,
it's like consistency of the tool is what matters. It doesn't matter necessarily if it's the bod pod or a DEXA scan or a hydrostatic weighing or whatever. As long as it's the same tool every time.
As long as it's the same.
Cool.
And honestly, for most people, if you measure your waist,
yes.
You drop inches on your waist, you probably drop body fat.
Yep. I've gone back to, and I know what April does, tape measurements as well, in terms of that is the least variance, right? As long as I'm the same person, as long as I measure you the first time and I measure you the same way the second time, I'm going to have consistent trackable results where there's no machine, there's nothing that comes in between what we're trying to get.
Exactly. Right, and you can measure both fat loss and muscle gain, right? Because you can measure your biceps and your thighs and your chest. And, of course, I've seen those slightly dip.
Yep. As you're leaning down.
As I'm leaning down. And again, for people listening, when you really go farther into a cut, because I started around 18, 19% body fat. I'm probably around 11, 12, maybe. Okay. I don't know, around 11 or 12. And that's where I'm going to end up because I don't want to go any further.
Yep.
You start getting hungry. You start to, you lose muscle mass first and then you lose strength is what I found. And my deadlift's going up, my squat's about stalled, the bench is stalled, and the press is going back.
Gotcha.
So I'm like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I need to start eating again.
I was going to ask, so that was my next question, because I know myself personally, I have a specific number where when my body weight drops under it, I know it. I can feel it in my lifts. I'm like, I'm too light. Yep. I know that I'm too. And I don't know. Have you found that number yet? Where you're like,
I think this is it. Like to go beyond this would be more of the obsessive. Like you're going to do a physique show or something.
Sure. And then you're doing it for the pure aesthetic aspect.
Yeah,
not
you're suffering on purpose.
Yeah.
And I don't need to do that. So now my goal is 5 pounds in 5 months of muscle.
Wow.
So
good for you.
To do that, I probably have to gain about 15 pounds in the next 5 months.
But it's good that you have that perspective because a lot of people are like, so I'll gain like 7 pounds and 5 it'll be muscle.
Oh, yeah,
like,
right.
Yeah, okay.
No, I think if you're new to it, like a third of it'll be muscle.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like for me to do that, like it's real hard now.
Yeah, for you it's probably like an 8
I have a training
16,
I have a training age of over 20 years at this point where like to change to put on 5 pounds in 5 months, I would be slamming steaks all day.
Yeah.
Like steak 3 times a day and sleeping my face off.
Right, 300 grams of protein a day. Yeah, right.
That's awesome though, man. So you have a plan. So you know what you're going to. So this next gain, you said you're going to gain about 15 pounds. So it's going to put you back in the low 180s?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, so about up to 0.5% a week of body weight gain. So like if you got to plan all this out. Like this is one of my big takeaways for sustainability, right? You have to track it and know what your numbers are. If I know I want to gain 0.5% of my body weight, I know exactly what I need to weigh on a 7-day moving average week to week.
Yep.
And if I'm going higher or lower than that, adjust the calories. Boom.
This is the concept that you're talking about is really hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't mean to be dismissive because it is hard to get to that point.
It's super hard, and people don't understand the journey. Like, so I talk to people a lot about the journey that you need to go on. Like, if you want to make a body change, it's not something that you can do in 6 months. You can change. Don't get me wrong. So you can lose a lot of weight quickly, and you can keep weight off quickly. But the journey that Philip's going on, and it's a very similar journey that I went on, takes a long time. I went from somewhere around 170 up to, so my bulk brought me up to about 225. I gained about 55 pounds doing that. That was, I was eating a lot of Five Guys, and it took me 5-6 years to do it. And then I would do what you're saying, and I pulled back down to 190, and then I popped back up to 220, and then I went back down to like 195, then I popped back up to like 220 again, and I've just yo-yoed that, and that's not a yo-yo diet thing.
These were intentional.
These were all intentional mass gains and cuts and mass gains, and it's just slowly every time you're just layering on a little bit of more muscle and a little bit more muscle. So you're just stacking that on, and over the years and over your training age, you just find yourself, you get a little bit thicker and a little bit stronger, and things just as long as you're consistent with it, move in the right direction.
It's like the stock market, right? Up and down, but always up.
It always slowly works its way up magically. I admire the journey you're on because it's not easy. It's not an easy journey. And to have the mental fortitude being like, it's okay to get a little fluffy because I'll pull it off eventually. And then I'll put it back on and then I'll pull it back off. Because as you said, there's a plan and it's all trackable and you're going to do it in a way that makes sense to you. And if you like, that's a super hard thing, especially what I've found is people that come from being overweight and they've lost all of that weight. And then I tell them, well, you need to put on some fat. They're like, I'm not doing that. Oh. And you're like, well, I can understand. You've worked really hard to get down to your body weight, but unfortunately you're going to need to put on some fat if you're going to put on muscle. It's just, exactly. And the only way, I guess I would say this, the only way that you can put on just straight muscle is if you play with drugs. Right. And if you play with drugs, yeah, you can do it. And that's when you see people put on 20 pounds of just straight muscle and they're super vascular and they're purple and you're like, well, what the fuck happened to that guy? He's probably playing with some drugs along the way. So, Philip, that's kind of brought us to where you're currently at, right? This is what you're currently doing, and it seems like over the last decade, you've really developed a big passion for strength training and fitness and trying to help people put them in the right paths. Anything that I missed? Anything that we didn't talk about that I should have talked about?
The only other thing I want to mention was how walking has kind of changed my life too.
Really? Walking. Okay. Fill me in.
And so when I broke my back, when I hurt my back and had to recover, I had to walk, right? And I used to hate walking.
Okay.
I found it boring. My wife loved walking, and she had to always drag me out to go on a walk. And when I recovered and started walking again, I eventually started building up where I was getting like 12,000 steps a day, and that's what I do every day now, which takes effort.
Especially because, as you said, you're working from home. So
treadmill.
A treadmill. So,
treadmill and then walking outside.
Cool. Because I would say if you were at an office, you could try to make a loop or find something. But I could see a lot of people falling into the trap of when they work at home, they walk from their bed to their table or the refrigerator back to their desk and their steps drastically decrease, never mind going the direction where yours went, where they
pacer.
Yeah, right. Where it sounds like yours have drastically increased.
They have, and I found that because of that, I really don't need to do any other type of cardio.
Yep.
And I also, my resting heart rate has come down. So for my whole life, it was in the upper 50s. I mean, at least for the last 10 years or so. And it dropped to like 52 when I started walking.
Interesting.
Cholesterol went down, all these things improved. And my metabolism has shot up beyond what I think it would have from lifting. And this is while I'm on a cut.
Okay.
So it's just this epiphany of, is this all from the walking? And there's no other variable that seems to correlate.
Have you read the book Comfort Crisis?
No.
Okay, so there's a book out there. A lot of people have read it recently. It's called Comfort Crisis. And what it does, it talks about how we're more comfortable now than we've ever been in the history of humankind, right? In the last 100 years, our technological developments, our food, our ability to be comfortable has increased drastically. But he also breaks it down, part of it, how we are genetically designed to walk. And we're not designed to be fast. Like, we're not outrunning animals. And he was making some analogy in the book, or not analogy, comparison of a kitten that's like 10 weeks old can run faster than us. Yeah. And is more equipped to kill something than we are with our bare hands because we don't have claws and we don't have sharp teeth and all of these things. But what we're genetically designed to do is walk long distances and then carry loads over long distances, i.e. we are designed to walk down an animal until it dies and then process the animal and carry it back.
Rock it back, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So we've been designed to walk, and there's a lot of really big health benefits that come with walking, which you're discovering.
So true.
And another part of it, what was really interesting, he was talking about the mental benefits that come from walking are exponential, but to receive them, you have to put your phone away. Where if you're walking and you're on your phone, checking your email, checking whatever, which I find myself guilty of, technically, a lot of times I try to listen to a book.
Is it okay to listen to something and still be looking at nature? You have to be totally unplugged.
But I'd be curious to see. Yeah, I do the same thing, right? Yeah. So it's really interesting that I literally just read this book where it really connects that all together of like, that's what we're designed to do. Yeah. And going back to it, you're finding a lot of these really big benefits. And I also know from a recovery side, on the weightlifting side, Walking shoes.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah.
Walking
No
shoes.
interference whatsoever.
Yep.
And even rucking, like I actually have a backpack and throw some weights in there, and that'll step it up a little bit.
And they actually talk about, in that book, they talk about the guy that created the Go Ruck Challenge, where it came from, what he did, what he was designing to do with it, how he was designing it, all of that fun stuff. So for any of our listeners, I actually really, really enjoyed the book, Comfort Crisis. Check it out. I have no ties to the book. I get nothing from you buying this book, but I thought it was a good read.
Amazon link in the show notes.
Yeah, exactly. I will drop that in there.
Actually, so another book somewhat related. It's called Burn. It came out earlier this year by.
I have not read it.
So Henry Poncer, he's like a very well-known researcher in the metabolism space. He's the one who came up with the constrained model of energy, as opposed to the additive model.
I don't know what that is.
Okay, so we all are familiar with the additive model, where the idea is the more activity you do, the more calories you burn.
Yep.
Indefinitely.
Yep.
The constrained model suggests that after a certain amount of activity, your body starts to adapt, metabolic adaptation, and so the total calories level out. They plateau. Now, a lot of people took this to mean, so I shouldn't even do exercise, right? Because it's going to be worse.
Sure. If I get to a certain point, then it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. But there's a huge first part of the graph that does show an increase anyway, so you should still be exercising. And walking does that. But he did all the studies with the Hadza tribe in Tanzania, where they did the double isotope water analysis, I think it's called, where they can measure precisely calories in, calories out.
Interesting.
And they found that the Hadza they're highly active, right? A Westerner is not very active at all, but they have similar metabolisms because of this phenomenon.
Okay.
But the other cool thing was, where do the Hadza get their activity? Walking.
Yeah, they're carrying water,
That's it.
carrying
It's the same thing. They're hunter-gatherers.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
where we originally came from.
Kill an animal, and they walk all day. They walk out back, and they get about 15,000 steps a day, 20,000 maybe.
Sure.
It's not a crazy amount.
Yeah, and the big difference is they're doing it because their lives depend on it. We're doing it because we're like, man, I want to close this ring on my iWatch today. Like, I better get out there.
That's so true. I'm good today. Yeah, okay.
There you go. So you closed your rings already. You're good to go. Dude, I think that's awesome, Philip. And I think that's a great place to leave it.
Thanks very much for joining me today. To view the show notes and a recap of today's episode, head over to podcast.witsandweights.com. Before you go, I have a quick favor to ask. If you enjoy the podcast, please let me know by leaving a review in Apple Podcasts. Reviews let Apple know that listeners like you enjoy my show, which helps people find the podcast in search results. It does make a huge difference. Thanks again for joining me, Philip Pape, in this episode of Wits and Weights. I'll see you next time, and stay strong.